Hello everyone, this is Pal Ponder on Weather. In this update, we're going to be talking about a Caribbean tropical disturbance that's going to bring flash flooding and potential landslides. So if you're new to the channel, click the subscribe button and notification bell to get all my daily updates to keep you ahead of the storm. So let's get right to it. Let's take a look at the big picture out here in the tropical Atlantic. You can see in stateside, we've got that upper level low that's dumping some very heavy rain today into Texas, and that's spreading in the midsection of the country. We've got Sam out here. Man, Sam has just been an amazing hurricane. This is the 6th day in a row. It's a major hurricane. In fact, it's packing 150-mile-per-hour Category 4 winds. But the good thing about Sam is it's literally just sitting and spinning. It's going to be out in the open waters and not really affect anybody. There's Victor out here off the coast of Africa there. That's expected to get to a minimal hurricane, but then that one's also safely going out to sea. So now we turn our attention to the Caribbean because this is October 1st, and that's typically when you start seeing more conducive development for tropical storms. We're watching these waves of energy coming out of the Atlantic, getting into more of a conducive environment. And as this will continue to shift further off into portions like, say, Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, over the next several days, we'll have increasing moisture, and then we could have a low-level center trying to form by next week, and that's going to dump some very heavy rains over the island of Jamaica and the Cayman Islands and portions of the Caribbean. So let's go over this. Let's take a look at the overall water vapor imagery, and you can see where the greens are. That is depicting on where your heavier rains and your flooding rains. That's Sam out here. There is Victor. But this is the area that I'm concerned about, is this wave of energy is trying to come out into development. And as it taps into and gets into the Caribbean, it's going to get into a little bit more favorable environment where they have a lot more upward rising motion air as we get into several days into October. And that's when I think we could have some trouble in the tropics, especially for the Caribbean, with some very heavy rain that I'm looking at setting up for portions of Jamaica and getting into the Cayman Islands. Let's take a look at the overall sea surface temperature, because right now, this is some of the hottest temperatures, and this is typically what you find in October. Some of the hottest temperatures out in the Atlantic are right over the Caribbean, and this is typically when you see some of the bigger name storms that can produce some very powerful hurricanes in this region. So this is definitely an area that I'm concerned about for development in October, and an area I'm watching closely as we get deeper in October. So let's take a look at where we are right now. So here's the favorable environment of where these tropical storms develop in October. And this is the most likely area you can see right here in the Caribbean, right? And this is typically more the favored tracks with cold fronts coming down from the United States. Typically they favor going into the Gulf, potentially going into Florida, and then maybe riding up the East Coast. That is typically the most favored track. So yes, some of them can get into the Gulf of Mexico, but most of the activity tends to shift further into the southeast, into Florida, and up along the East Coast. Here's where we are currently right now as far as this tropical season. Man, we've got 20 named storms, 65 storm days, 7 of those were hurricanes, 23 hurricane days, 4 majors, and 11 days, almost 12 days of a major hurricane, thanks to Sam and Larry. That accounts for most of that. And then, of course, we have Ida and then Grace, but they weren't really technically major hurricanes for very long before they actually made impact and landfall. And that's that has the accumulated cyclone energy pretty high, 130%, really, because of Sam and Larry accounting for much of that energy out there into the open waters of the Atlantic. So, but yeah, you can definitely see, based on averages over the last 30 days, we're well above average, and all these percentages are well above average currently. And we still got a good solid 2 months left. We got all of October, and we still have technically all of November. October is very busy. November definitely tends to die down. Typically, we see a little bit of a bump in the middle of November typically. So yeah, we're still looking at about 6 weeks of, some sort of tropical development out there in the Caribbean or the Atlantic. And I think then things start to kind of wind down as you get into the second half, and especially, of course, going into the December. So, but yeah, what we're dealing with, I showed you the sea surface temperatures at the surface, but here's in the deep ocean waters, and that's why it's so much. These things can really start to explode in the Caribbean once they tap into this environment sometimes, because they're dealing with this deep tropical moisture. So you got deep ocean content waters are very high, not just at the surface, but well down. Like we're talking easily a half a mile down of those warmer temperatures. So as the storm goes across and you get into an upward rising motion environment, it's got a lot of energy to tap into, and they can produce some very heavy rainmakers. And of course, at times they can really spin up to some big, powerful tropical storms. So let's take a look at the overall vertical velocity index. And this is what I'm concerned about going into the Caribbean as we get into October. There where we are currently right now. This came out on September 29th. So this is October 1st. You can see right here, it's not very favorable, right? But once it gets into the Caribbean, there's Jamaica and there's the Cayman Islands, you start getting the blues, and that's where you start getting to the little bit more upward rising motion air. And especially as we get into that second week of October, all this turns blue. So we're going into a lot more favorable environment for these tropical storms to develop. And it really doesn't even have to be a named storm. This can be a very conducive environment to dump some very heavy rainfall over an extended period of time, because this environment is still going to have that upward rising motion air for a long time. So it's going to be very easy for storms or tropical, or thunderstorms to develop in that environment. So as we move forward, let's take a look at the overall precipitable water imagery. This kind of depicts on where some of the drier areas and where's the more moist areas. I showed you the water vapor with all the green. Here's the red with some of the heavier rainfall and heavier precipitation out here into the Lesser Antilles. That is this afternoon on Friday. But as we get into Saturday, you can see that area of tropical moisture is trying to move a little bit further into the Caribbean. It gets close to Jamaica. So you're going to be getting some of those scattered rain showers, heavier rains at times throughout the day. But we got a big slug of tropical moisture waiting in the wings, going to be spreading into the later half of the weekend. As we get into that Sunday time frame, that slug of moisture will start spreading into Jamaica. So you're going to be getting a compounding effect of daily rain showers, thunderstorms, subtle, scattered, but then it just picks up in intensity as we go deeper into the weekend and especially next week. So it's a compounding effect that could dump a lot of heavy rain. And then once the deep surge of tropical moisture sets in, that's when we could cause some major flooding issues and potential landslides as we get into the middle of next week for Jamaica, into the Cayman Islands. So this is one of the things I'm concerned about, and I wanted to give you plenty advanced warning of what I'm kind of looking at as we go into next week, because the time we get into Monday, October the 4th, that deep tropical moisture is not red anymore. Now it's purple. So it taps into that little bit more upward rising motion environment. It taps into some of that deep ocean water content. And then you got a lot of favorable upward rising motion. And boom, you got some very heavy rain setting up spreading closer into the Caribbean. So you're still going to get some heavier rains spreading into Jamaica, into the Cayman Islands. There's the Yucatan. So as this slug of moisture continues to spread, and notice how really slow it's moving, right? It's not really moving very fast. So that's why it's going to be an extended compounding effect that has potential major effects by the time the really surge comes in by Tuesday of next week. That's when we see a lot of the deep tropical purples showing up, and that's going to spread over the island. And I think that's when you start getting some of the more serious rains by then. So that's 5 days from now. So between now and then, you're still going to get a lot of rain. But yeah, early by the middle of next week, we could be looking at some very heavy rain, and that's when we could cause some of that major flooding issues and potential landslides, on the island. And that tropical moisture will start spreading into the Cayman Islands, right? And as this continues shifting off further into, the Gulf of Mexico into Florida, and I showed you the more favorable and track of these tropical slug of moistures in October. So as we get into Wednesday, October the 6th, we could have enough of that energy rotating around over an extended period of time where we could have a low pressure center starting to develop. And if it does, this could be maybe a low end tropical storm. It doesn't even have to be a tropical storm to cause major issues, but it could be, yes, that over an extended period of time, you get enough moisture around, you get enough thunderstorms in a conducive an environment for an extended period of time to create a low level center and drop it right under basically Jamaica. And this would continue lifting off further off into the north and northeast as we get into the later half of next week. And that surge of tropical moisture just parks itself over Jamaica, dumping some very heavy rain over Jamaica. That's what we could have potential major issues by then on the island. So this is what I'm looking at and concerned about for you guys in Jamaica as we get into next week. And that's just going to spread into the Cayman Islands as well. And so, yes, as we get into that Thursday time frame, just notice how it doesn't really move very much, right? So this could be an extended compounding effect, and especially between Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week for Jamaica getting into the Cayman Islands, we could be having potentially some major issues on the island with flash flooding taking over as we get into the middle of next week. It's not really mainly a wind threat because this is a developing system. It's just a tropical, not even a tropical disturbance technically right now. It's just an area of Caribbean moisture that's going to be compounding and get possibly into a tropical disturbance. Then if it's able to do that, it's not going to be much of a wind threat. So that's not going to be really the main issue for basically Jamaica and Caymans. But it could potentially develop into more of a bigger tropical storm, as we get into that, this is the time frame that I've been looking at for a while now, between that October 6th and October 14th time frame. That's when the area of the MJO will come around. It has a little bit more favorable environment to tap into. This is the area that I was, kind of concerned about in the extended range of more of the bullseye, more closer in development. So this is what I'm definitely concerned about. And if this definitely comes to fruition, we could be looking at easily double-digit totals on the island, especially as we go into next week. So this is the total precipitation for the next week on the island. So yes, you're going to be getting some heavier rains for the next several days, but some of the bigger rains could really start to take over as that slug of moisture starts to extend and spread into the island. And yes, you could have obviously landslide issues by then on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So I wanted to give you plenty of time to prepare for this potential, flash flooding event, on the island, and that would continue spreading into the Caymans. And this tropical slug of moisture will continue spreading off to the northeast. So we'll have to see if this is able to develop in some sort of tropical entity by then, possibly impacting Florida later on down the line. So that's something I'm going to be looking at on the extended range. So I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video. Definitely leave your comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel to catch the latest update where I protect you before and after the storm.